Most civilizations feared collapse. Ancient India feared something else: burnout. Long before corporate ladders, therapy sessions, or the phrase midlife crisis ever existed, Indian thinkers asked a dangerous question: what happens when ambition never ends? Their answer wasn't a warning. It was a plan. A plan so radical that it told people, kings, warriors, scholars, householders, to walk away from success at its peak. This is the story of the Ashrama system, not as philosophy, not as religion, but as one of history's boldest experiments in controlling ego, power, and the human mind. The problem: no empire escapes picture the ancient world. Empires rise on hunger, hunger for land, wealth, recognition, immortality. Most civilizations reward ambition endlessly. Grow richer, rule longer, build bigger monuments, die in power. But ancient India noticed something unsettling. Ambition does not slow down with age. It hardens. Men who refuse to step aside become tyrants. Families fracture over inheritance. Societies rot when elders cling to authority too long. Power, left unchecked, does not stabilize civilization. It consumes it. So instead of asking how to gain power, Indian thinkers asked, when should you let it go? A life designed in advance, the Ashrama system divided human life into 4 stages, not based on class or wealth, but on psychology. This wasn't destiny. It was choreography. A human life was meant to change roles, deliberately, visibly, and publicly. First, Brahmacharya, the student. Youth was for discipline, restraint, learning. Desire was dangerous here, so it was delayed. Knowledge came before ambition. Second, Grahastha, the householder. This was the only stage where wealth, pleasure, sex, and power were not just allowed, but required. Society needed builders, producers, parents, leaders. But here is the twist most people miss. This stage had an expiration date, and ancient India took that deadline seriously. Success was the danger zone. Grahastha was not the goal. It was the risk. This is where ego forms, where identity hardens, where a person begins to believe they are indispensable. Ancient texts describe this phase with admiration and suspicion, because if a person stayed here too long, something broke. Greed replaced duty. Control replaced care. Legacy replaced wisdom. So the system did something shocking. It told people, you must leave. The stage modern society erased. The third stage was Vanaprastha, the forest dweller. Not exile, not poverty, withdrawal. This was ancient India's answer to the midlife crisis. When strength peaked and authority felt natural, society asked individuals to loosen their grip, to step back from decision-making, to mentor instead of command. Kings handed power to heirs. Householders reduced possessions. Warriors laid down weapons. The forest was symbolic. It represented distance, from noise, from praise, from temptation. This wasn't running away from life. It was training for loss. Why this was revolutionary: no other ancient civilization institutionalized stepping aside. Rome clung to power until assassination. China relied on dynasties and coups. Egypt preserved rulers beyond death. India tried something quieter. It turned aging into a social transition, not a personal failure. Midlife wasn't collapse. It was initiation. The final letting go. Then came the most extreme stage, Sannyasa, renunciation. No home, no identity, no role. This stage terrified society, and that was the point. Sannyasas reminded everyone that power was temporary, wealth meaningless, status an illusion. They stood outside the system, immune to corruption, impossible to bribe. But here's the uncomfortable truth: very few people reached this stage. Not because they couldn't, because letting go is harder than conquering. Cracks beneath the ideal: the ashrama system was elegant, but imperfect. It assumed choice, but many never had one. Caste restricted mobility. Women were often excluded or constrained. Poverty made renunciation impossible. And as kingdoms centralized, rulers found stepping aside inconvenient. Over time, the system weakened. The transitions blurred. Vanaprastha faded first. People stopped leaving, and ambition stayed too long. The world we inherited today, we live in a civilization with no exit ramp. Careers never end. Power never releases. Identity becomes permanent. Midlife crises aren't planned anymore. They erupt. Burnout, depression, ego collapse, treated as personal failures instead of predictable phases. Ancient India didn't eliminate these problems, but it expected them. And expectation changes everything. The question that remains, the Ashrama system wasn't about escaping life. It was about knowing when to change who you are. So here's the question ancient India leaves us with. What would happen if modern society planned for letting go, instead of pretending success should last forever? If you enjoyed this deep dive into forgotten systems that shape civilization, subscribe for more cinematic history that explores not just what happened, but why humans chose it. Because sometimes, the most radical ideas in history aren't about conquering the world. They're about knowing when to walk away.